we put together a study, a 2-year study, that we had 3 locations, Homerville, Cocktail, and Douglas, Georgia, and we used 2 cultivars, Meadowlark, as well as Bridewell. In 2022, we started harvesting in May 17th, and then what we did is we went back to the field, and we had marked a set of plants that we didn't touch the first week, and we harvested a week later, and then we looked at the quality. In 2023, we did the exact same thing, but we had 3 harvests. So we started, let's say, in April 18th. Second harvest was April 25th. Third harvest was May 2nd. We looked at quality at harvest, and then we looked at quality after 7, 14, and 21 days of storage. Moving on to the results on what we saw that fruit size increased with delayed harvest in the first season, so you ended up getting a little bigger berry by waiting 7 days. However, during storage, especially in 2023, I don't have any pointer, but you can see the big decline in the middle of the right graph over there. But after, if you wait to harvest, if you wait 1 or 2 weeks, you end up having a decline. Fruit shrink much faster. That was evident in the Douglas location. Firmness is very important, as it's a major quality aspect of blueberries. Firmness declined over time of storage, and in some cases, especially in Douglas, you can see that waiting an extra 7 days, we had a significant decline in firmness, both at harvest as well as during storage. Same we saw for Meadowlark and Homerville, that you had a decline over time, and during storage, you had a lower firmness if you waited longer to harvest. The percent of damaged berries is important because you don't want to get fruit rejected. And what we found out is that we had an increased percent of damaged berries in the majority of our delayed harvests. So in a nutshell, delaying your harvest by 1 or 2 weeks, and you end up with a significantly higher percent of damaged berries. And you can see how you start. Let's say if you go to the very right, you start with about 3 to 4%. If you wait a week longer, that goes up to 15%. If you wait another week, that goes to about 25%. So by delaying your harvest by 2 weeks, a quarter of your fruit has fruit split, is soft, and will be rejected. Total soluble solids, which is bricks or sugars, we didn't see any clear pattern. We had an increase in total soluble solids in Meadowlark on the very right, the longer you waited, but for the Bridewell locations, we didn't see any difference. Titratable acidity is something you expect to decline over time, and this is what we saw. The longer you waited, the lower the titratable acidity we got, and that was the case in all treatments except for the Bridewell Douglas 2023 location. So wrapping up this 2-year study, we found out that delaying your harvest by 7 or 14 days, you end up getting lower firmness values, both at harvest as well as after 7, 14, and 21 days of storage. The percent of damaged berries was significantly higher in harvest 2 in year 2022, but we had only 1 delayed harvest, and in harvests 2 and 3 in year 2023. Overall, delayed harvest did reduce fruit storability by contributing negatively to firmness and other quality characteristics. So our outcome was that 7 days are recommended. Harvests shorter than 7 days apart are recommended to maintain quality and increase storage potential. So then our next thought was, how often should we harvest to avoid all these quality issues? Since we know that 7 or 14 days later is too long, let's go shorter than 7 days and assess the denser picking intervals on the storability of rapid-eye blueberries only this time. So to do that, we did 2 years of work in Alma, at the Alma Blueberry Research Farm. We did 3 harvests, and the treatments were as follows. We had T1, which was a harvest every 2 days, T2, which was a harvest every 3 days, and T3 had a harvest every 7 days. We had 4 applications, and we stored the fruit at 34 degrees Fahrenheit and 85% relative humidity. And fruit quality assessments were done on day 1, day 7, day 14, and day 21. Just so that you have it in mind, here are 2 graphs of the air temperature on the left, where with the straight red line, you see the maximum temperature of 2023. The dotted red line is the maximum temperature of 2024. And then with blue lines, our minimum of 2023 is a straight line, and minimum of 2024 is a dotted line. On the right, you see the rain events, the daily precipitation during the harvest season for both years. Blue is the 2023 rainfall, and gray is the 2024 rainfall. So overall, 2023 was much more wet. We had much more rain events. And 2024 was warmer when it comes to both maximum and minimum temperatures. Looking now at the weight loss, again, the green bars are the optimum harvest. The harvest 2 for treatment A is 2 days later, and the harvest 3 for treatment A is 4 days later. And then if you go to treatment B, you go 0, 3, 6 days, and treatment C is 0, 7, and 14 days. So we're looking at different harvest intervals. So as you can tell, weight loss was significantly higher if you waited 2 or 4 days, 3 or 6 days, as well as 7 and 14 days. And that was apparent for both years. When it comes to berry damage, we saw leaking symptoms and fruit split, and it was evident that the lowest berry damage percentage was for the time 0 harvest. If you waited 2 or 4 days, you see you more than double the percent of damaged berries. And if you waited 7 or 14 days, you went from about 8% berry damage all the way to about 40% 14 days later. So it confirms our previous findings, and it shows that the shorter your picking intervals, the better the fruit quality you get at harvest and after storage. Berry diameter, we had some decline initially, or no changes in the treatments B and C. Moving on, firmness. There were no differences in firmness in year 2023, as well as in year 2024. There was some decline in the tradable acidity, especially with the longer harvest interval. If you waited 14 days, the tradable acidity went down, and there was a slight increase in the anthocyanin level if you waited longer. So to make a long story short, treatment A, which was a 2-day harvest interval, and treatment B, which was a 3-day interval, helped maintain the berry quality over treatment C. The treatment C, which was a 7-day interval, had the lowest fruit firmness values, showed the highest water loss percent after 21 days of cold storage, and overall, the symptomatic berry damage were observed in the harvests 2 and 3 of treatment C. We also saw higher soluble solids and lower TA in berries from harvest 3 and higher anthocyanin levels. However, what we need to keep in mind is that we had a very high percent of wet, sunken, and poor quality berries if we waited 7 or 14 days to harvest. So concluding, shorter picking intervals, 2 to 3 days apart, do help preserve fruit quality since they reduce moisture loss, they maintain firmness, and they minimize berry damage. Treatment B, which was a 3-day interval, was effective in balancing the fruit quality and storage potential, being a practical harvesting schedule for growers. We're hoping to do further research to investigate mechanical harvesting adaptations and to explore the impact of weather on blueberry ripening and post-harvest behavior. So I'm gonna show you this as I do in every meeting I go to, since I get questions all the time about the recommended storage conditions. The optimum temperature is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Somewhere between 32 and 35 is where we're shooting to be. Fruit does not freeze at 32. It has sugar in there, and it doesn't freeze at the temperature. However, I know that our cold rooms often don't have the capacity to go that low, so we are sitting somewhere at 33, 34, 35, and that's fine. You want a high relative humidity, 85 to 95% if possible, because if you have a low relative humidity, you have increased weight loss. The fruit loses water over time, and then you end up with shrunk berries, and the quality declines significantly. Ethylene production, luckily, is not an issue for blueberries. We have very low ethylene production. However, if you have exogenous ethylene in the room from other sources, blueberries will respond to ethylene, but their flavor does not improve. So thinking you could treat ethylene with blueberries with ethylene in order to make them sweeter or more blue or something, it will not work. Overall, we want to make sure we have a good aeration system to remove ethylene from the storage, since it also affects disease development. Controlled atmosphere is being used abroad, but we don't use it, and it's been shown that shipments with 15 to 20% CO2 and 5 to 10% oxygen will reduce the growth of decay, but that's expensive, and we don't use it. However, what we need to keep in mind is that cooling is the single most important way of reducing losses and extending the shelf life of the product. Now, when you bring the product in from the farm, you want to remove the field heat as quickly as possible. Many smaller operations just put the berries in the cold room and they wait for it to cool down. The best way of cooling the fruit and removing the field heat is what we call forced air cooling, where you have high-speed fans that draw air through the product and remove the field heat efficiently. It's much faster, and it ensures that your product gets to a low temperature much quicker than if it were to sit in the cold room for hours or even days to get to the temperature that we want. As I said, 32 to 34 is the ideal temperature as quickly as possible, and we do that to reduce water loss, decay, respiration rate, and overall extend the shelf life. For blueberries, we are getting in ideal conditions up to 4 weeks of shelf life, which is pretty good, but the longer you wait to cool down or the more inefficiencies you have in your cold chain, the shorter the shelf life gets. As I mentioned before, storage temperature is the single most important factor that affects fruit quality. By reducing the fruit temperature from the typical temperature of 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 85 to the recommended 32 degrees, you will increase the shelf life by 8 to 10 times. Temperature is also affecting the decay organisms. It has been shown that if you are to cool the fruit fully in 2 hours versus over a period of 2 days, you will end up having significantly less decay compared to, if you compare the two, the two-day would have much higher decay incidence. Forced air cooling, which is an efficient cooling system, is suggested, and cooling as quickly as possible after harvest, and harvesting during the cooler morning hours of the day are good suggestions to maintain fruit quality. Here are two publications that my lab and Zilfina Rubio's lab put together, and they are out at the UGA Extension website. You can scan the QR code, or you can go to Google the names of the publications, and we have some information about harvesting and handling of blueberries, as well as the blueberry fruit set development and ripening. You might find these interesting. With that, I'd like to thank you all for being here in this chilly room. And I would like to thank my student, Amit Godara, who did most of the work, the Rubio Lab, as well as the Georgia Blueberry Commission for funding most of this research. And if we have any time, Sarah, I'll be happy to take any questions. Any questions about blueberry harvesting, handling?
Sorry about the humidity. Get that humidity down. Air conditioning naturally dehumidifies.
Yeah.
I don't know how far you can break it. I just know that I just thought getting rid of humidity would help. You're saying that humidity will help the higher the humidity.
Yeah.
Around 90%, 80%.
Yes. Removing the humidity is good for disease, but you end up drying your fruit.
Right.
And you don't want that, because your fruit will shrivel and the quality will go down. It will become softer. So you need to add humidity. If your refrigeration unit is removing it naturally, all ACs are taking out humidity, you need to have a humidifier added to the room.
Have you done any testing to see what's the dust temperature? Let me phrase that. In other words, I have seen research that 35 degrees is a difference between 40 degrees. Cooling is a gap.
Yeah.
And the fruit will last longer the closer you get to 35
Yeah.
as opposed to 40 degrees. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we can say that, we know it's a fact. Have y'all done any research on that? Just back that up?
I haven't done in my lab, but I've seen work from other labs.
No, I'm talking to Mike.
I'm sorry, yeah. I haven't done any research in my lab, but I've seen data that show that, if you go above 41, you have also a lot of fungal decay. Many of these diseases proliferate above 41, 42 degrees. So not only your fruit gets softer, because it's more. Imagine when you put your fruit down to 34, 35 degrees, you slow down all the metabolic processes. It goes to sleep, so it will last longer. If you increase it, it'll be more active, cell walls will break down and whatnot, it'll become softer. When you go above 41 or 42 degrees and you have high humidity, which is what we want, you have a perfect environment for fungal growth. So whatever has been sitting there, spores and stuff, will start growing. And then they will attack any opening, any crack, and they're going to find food in there. And that's where you get not only softening and low quality, but you get also the fungal growth and the diseases that you don't want. So you have the double one.
I know I get 92%. I'm below 92% where I put it in the year.
92%. And that's how many days after harvest do you send your fruit out? Do you immediately?
Mine is gone
3
3 days.
days.
I don't want to add that 7 with your research. Verifies what I'm doing.
Yeah. One of the issues that I see here in Georgia a lot and all over the country is that we don't want to think what's happening down the road. So long as it's out our door, we think, oh, fine. But then what I'm worried is that if we send fruit of poor quality, maybe it'll go through, it'll pass your 92 score, but if it gets to the store and you get a lot of decay, a lot of quality issues, people will complain. And then we don't want our berries to have a bad rep in the market, because we're going to lose eventually market from another competitor that is doing a better job in cooling the product appropriately and whatnot. So I strongly suggest to follow those rules, even if we don't see the fruit going bad in 3 days, because you won't see, even at 45 or 50 degrees, fruit will look okay for 3, 4, 7 days. But then in 14 days, when the fruit is in Canada or in Washington State, we don't know what's happening. That's what I'm suggesting. Don't only judge the quality until it's out of your door. Think about it down the road. No. And anything you guys need, you feel free to reach out. I'm in Tifton, but I work with the blueberry industry in Alma and in other areas in the state. So just shoot me an email if you have any questions. I'll be happy to help. Okay? Thank you. Hope I didn't go overboard. Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Angelos for speaking with us and our sponsors. That concludes the speak. We have a couple of panelists, blueberry marketers panelists at 2:10. So you can stick around, you can step outside and do whatever you need to do. And then we'll be back here for the panel. Just a quick reminder before we get started, you guys know this, I'm beating a dead horse here, but pesticides in the back, scan your badge, and then the survey, if you'd be willing to do that. With that, I'll have Zilfina introduce our panelists.
Hello, everyone. So we're welcome our presenters from Wish Farms and Cal Giant. And Sarah is going to provide the questions to them. And if you have more questions within that, or if you have questions, just raise your hand.
All right. First question. Never done this before. This will be interesting. How far in advance do marketers want estimates? I would assume so, yes.
We want estimates as absolutely far ahead as we can get them. It helps us with planning distribution or allocation between customers. It helps us with planning our materials and operational needs. And the more accurate they can be, the better we can perform. And it's not just true of the estimates that we get from our growers. It's equally as true of the estimates that growers get, other marketers get from their growers, because it all gets put into the soup and contributes to how everybody is putting out pricing. And generally speaking, as an industry, the more aligned we are on what we expect to happen during the season, the better we're able to sell the crop. You have anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just ladder onto that the, if you get estimates farther enough in advance, we can create, as Travis was mentioning there, what we call an organized market, where we can line the demand up necessary to pull that fruit through, allow our customers, and if you think about retailers, they want to set ads, they want to be able to get all of the planning that they need to be done as far in advance as well, and it just creates a much more organized market that will perform better from a price perspective.
Okay. On the topic of pre-sales, do most major marketers pre-sale fruit?
They should. If they're not, they are operating off a very old model that sort of, get the pile going and trying to sell the pile. So pre-selling meaning, just what we were just talking about, is knowing what your estimates are going to be, going out and generating the kind of demand necessary to pull that volume of fruit through, and it gives us a way better chance to have a higher priced market. So pre-selling, which includes volume, and it will usually include a price range. Sometimes the price doesn't get locked in until you're closer to the week of shipping. But yeah, both those two factors usually are at play. And if you're not pre-selling, unless it's a period of time where there's just going to be very low supply and high demand, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
What about the answer to the question? What was the question?
Major
Yes,
marketers.
most major marketers are pre-selling. And the time in advance varies depending on the customer.
Okay.
It's almost impossible to give you accurate information before we have. Now, we can tell you how much we're gonna have, but to tell you exactly when it's gonna come in, we can't do it, and it's always been in trouble, it's always business, because I don't understand. Used to, we had to advertise in the paper, we had to put flyer, print flyer, and all that. Now we got computers, I don't understand why. 2 weeks, 10 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks, now you couldn't do an ad and retail some food based on what you do actually foresee.
Can you repeat?
No, I got you. So that is changing somewhat, and it, depending on the retailer, will depend on what their capabilities are. They're working off history. They're looking at what they did last year, and sometimes they want to repeat that same thing. And so if that's already sort of locked into their planning calendar, you can get a little bit closer in. But what we're dealing with as marketers is also that everyone's competing for that business. So the further out we can get, the better off we're going to be able to secure that business. And when we talk about estimates, we've got history, and if there's not huge changes from one year to the other, weather is going to move maybe the start or the end of it a little bit, you feel pretty safe being able to go out and doing a promotion, even if you don't have the, ideally perfect estimates. It's if they're moving by, let's say 25%, 15%, then that can be a bit problematic in that if you're getting less fruit, you're not able to fulfill those commitments. And if you get a lot more fruit, then you just have more open fruit. And if everybody's doing the same thing, then that's when the market can come apart. So
That's when the retailers win and the farmers lose.
I think we all lose, but yeah.
All right, on to a packaging question. Is there a benefit to having heat-sealed fruit packaging? Heat-sealed.
Is there a benefit to having heat sealed packaging? So there's some retailers that specifically require heat sealed packaging, and so to participate in their or to be awarded that business, you have to fulfill that requirement. Is there a benefit in the sense of fruit quality? Not that I'm aware of. I've not seen any specific data to support that. There is a slight benefit to food safety. Heat seal packaging, once it's been opened, it's very evident that it's been tampered with or modified in some way, and so there's not an opportunity for somebody to pop a lid open and do something maybe nefarious there. Not that I've ever seen that, but that is a theoretical benefit. I'd say that's most of my thoughts on that one.
I think so. And why do customers like Costco require or request heat seal or having a secondary, enclosure is as you know, people go in there and they pick them up and turn the clamshells over, they dump all over. And, there are professional scam artists who will pretend like they slipped and fell, and then they've got a lawsuit. And so, they're just trying to mitigate all of those potential risks, and especially with the larger clamshells, and heat seal kind of fixes that for us. So there's benefits, but not a lot of requirements around it.
Purchase orders. How far in advance do you typically provide purchase orders to your packers? Yeah.
So sales change on a daily basis, almost an hourly basis, especially when you get into the heat of the season. We may provide a preliminary, we will provide to packing houses or growers, suppliers that we work with, a preliminary preseason estimation of what we think will sell across their year. That's very general. We think based on our changes to our customer base this year, and how we were engaged with them last year that we may sell 40% pints, 30% 18 ounce, 10% 6 ounce, and the rest of it in some other size. And then once you get into the season and get rolling, it's very difficult to provide a plan that doesn't require change or modification really and truly more than a day in advance. Sometimes you get lucky and you could do it 2 or 3 days in advance, but there's a lot of logistics. There's a lot of changes in harvest volumes from this packing house came up with some extra, and this packing house came up a little bit short, or you have a certain quality issue in a certain place that you're trying to work with and work around and try and maximize the value of the fruit for everybody. And to do that requires some flexibility and understanding on all parties that the goal is to maximize the value of the fruit. And to do that, we may need to change what we're doing even middle of the day. Now, we obviously try and minimize that because it creates disruption and inefficiencies at the packing level. But it's important to be able to make changes on the fly, again, with the goal and desire to maximize the value of the fruit.
What happens during a rejection due to fruit quality?
So we receive the fruit, we send it to a customer, and the fruit quality doesn't meet their specification. And so an inspection is done upon receipt. Sometimes we'll call in a USDA inspection, depending on who the customer is. If we're very familiar with that customer's inspection process, we may accept that. It should include pictures, it should include lot numbers, all the reasons why the fruit is got some sort of a problem. And then within whatever you ship them, so let's say we ship them a full load, there may be some of that load that they want to keep, or they may want to reject the whole thing. So if they're rejecting fruit, then we either call in a truck or take that same truck and then move it to another, usually a wholesaler, depending on where in the country it is. So for instance, if it's near one of the major markets, it's going to go to a terminal wholesaler, could be New York, LA, whatever. If it's not near a major market, then it's going to go to a distributor or a wholesaler who can work that product and try to get the best return for us that they can, depending on what the market and what the quality of the fruit was. So there are times when the quality of the fruit is maybe right on the border, and they'll keep it with what we call protection, which means the price is now negotiable depending on how much of that fruit they're able to sell through and at what price. So there's a lot of variables here. Unfortunately, there's times when the market is so short, if someone calls for a rejection, then that fruit can return maybe even as high a price as it was originally sold at. And then other times when the market's pretty sloppy and you get very little return at all for it. So kind of situational, but what a marketer or a shipper should make sure they're doing is that they know what the inspection process is for each of their customers, so that they can at least hold that customer accountable for having reported good information.
Okay. What countries do you typically export to?
Cow Giant, we've got Mexico and Canada. We don't have exports outside of that at this time.
We export some to Canada. We sell to some exporters a couple of pallets at a time, maybe that find their ways overseas. But it's a very difficult process. There's a very narrow window for it, generally speaking, at different times of the year. And we are fairly young in the blueberry industry as a marketer, and so we are working on just maximizing our reach within the U.S. market.
Okay, we're going to jump to the future real quick. Where do you see the future in the domestic conventional market?
Demand for and consumption of blueberries has gone through the roof over the last probably, I would say 10 years. A lot of that's been driven by improvements in genetics and as well as availability. There used to be very significant high and low seasons for blueberries throughout the year, and different production regions have improved their production practices or been able to take advantage of new varieties to really fill in those low and high seasons of the year. And so it's really made it, I think, a staple for a lot of households that go to the store and, expect to see blueberries on the shelf and see them at a price that's accessible to them. And I think that as long as the quality of the fruit that we are continuing to put on the shelves improves over time, that demand is going to continue to grow with it. During high quality times of the year, we typically see very good demand relative to maybe historical with good quality fruit. It's when we get into a quality challenge time that I think demand tends to stall out and the market struggles to move, can struggle to move volume.
Yeah, spot on. I personally, I feel that blueberries could be consumed at the same rate that strawberries can. So right now, around 70% of U.S. households are going to buy strawberries at least once a year. Blueberries is around 55%. I've seen that grow by more than 20 percentage points in my career. And I think that blueberries could get to that same level of penetration. So we're doing all the right things: varietal improvements, quality improvements, cold chain, making them more accessible. And so I don't see any barriers to us reaching that level of penetration, as we move forward here. So I think it's a very bright future. And I would say the same thing for organic. So organic has its place in the market alongside conventional, and I think that the consumption will continue to grow, especially if we look at being able to provide that kind of volume year-round. So right now, there's definitely periods where organic is more readily available, and if we fill in the periods where it's more constrained, then we'll see it continue to grow at a really good rate as well. So I just threw that in there as well. Yeah.
Okay. On imports, as a domestic grower, how worried should we be about imported fruit?
As a domestic grower?
Yeah.
It's a tricky question. We see it across all produce commodities, and berries and blueberries are certainly no exception. With demand, as Travis mentioned, demand all over the world continuing to increase. Every place in the world that can grow blueberries is trying to do it. If we here in the U.S. continue to focus on quality, if we continue to focus on flavor, our distance to market is really close. And if we continue to focus on, driving costs out wherever we can, I think the U.S. can compete quite well. You hear people talk about, people are dumping berries, here in the U.S. and whatnot. There's a truth to that, but there's also a truth to if an area in the U.S. is overproduced, it dumps berries at the same rate. So, if we do those things, quality, shelf life, time to market, and flavor, then we'll compete really well.
I think I would just add, that was largely well put. I would add to that I don't think that there's a retailer in the country that said like quality, apples to apples comparison, that they would rather buy an imported berry over a domestic berry. These other countries are producing extremely competitive fruit from a quality perspective, and I think that we have seen them make gains in that regard. Very firm berries, 100% blue all the way around, that kind of thing that has really opened the door for some retailers to say, you've got to match what these other people are putting in front of me. And and you've got my business. So I do think that has been a significant driver in the U.S. I don't think there's a retailer that would rather buy an imported berry over a domestic berry that I've come across. I agree. Yeah.
If there's any questions that the audience have, feel free to ask at any time.
The educational sessions here? No, I did not.
A lot of questions we can answer. Our consumption in 20 years is triple. Y'all didn't know that. Okay? Why? Tell me why the blueberry customer would want to buy blueberries. Y'all didn't know that.
What's the question?
Because they enjoy eating blueberries?
Why does a blueberry person or a customer buy blueberries?
The answer is convenience, health halo, events in their lives, just like all the other berries.
Health. Focus on health. Are you talking about influence in Mexico? They're not regulated. They still using DDT. If you eat a blueberry that has DDT on it, you think your customer needs to know that.
Well, anything that we would bring in that's grown, whether it's Canada, Mexico, or anywhere else, has to go through rigorous food safety audits, and they are audited, and we verified those audits. So they're having to comply to all of the rules and regulations that the U.S. has for food and for berries.
You know, that's an issue that we have to deal with, no matter what. Advertising is that our berries are grown in the United States, we are regulated. Okay?
Yes.
Our regulation, if I stack over every book that I have on regulations, is this tall.
And that's why we require those same regulations for anything that we bring in as well. Now, that's not to say that there's certainly shoddy growers, in those countries, but as a major marketer, we're not going to deal with any of those types of businesses. We're going to verify it through audit. We're going to have boots on the ground, and we're going to make sure that all of that is following our same food safety and protocols.
That's key. We're regulated. If we put anything on ours, it's regulated.
Yeah, in addition to that, the FDA, and actually to Tim's point there, both conduct pesticide residue testing to make sure that there's not pesticides that are out of compliance. Because the last thing that we want to do is put a berry on the shelf that could be hazardous to somebody's health, and that would be grossly irresponsible.
We got any more? Okay. How important are accurate estimates, back to the grower estimates?
They're absolutely critical. The worst thing that could happen is a grower tells us, hey, tomorrow I'm going to harvest, 100,000 pounds, whatever the number is. And they get out into the field, and at the end of the day, we hear back from them and say, hey, we picked 175,000 or 200,000 pounds. And tomorrow, I know I told you 125, and I think I've got another 200,000 out there. Now we're reacting. Instead of being proactive, we're reacting. And reacting is, on that kind of notice, is where you get into the transactional markets, which are highly undesirable. That's where you find those $8, $9, $10 pints. The goal is to stay out of the transactional market as much as possible, because that is the most exposure, because you're desperate at that point. You have a pile that's much more significant than you expected to have, and much more significant than your customers expected you to have. And now you're looking down your list and seeing where can I put this fruit, and that's a major exposure.
Yeah, you if the planning isn't at the highest level, so planning both the supply side and the demand side, then you're having to discount. Now, in anybody's portfolio, you want to have, customers, say like food service customers who you have on contract. You know what that business is going to be. It's on automatic, pricing is set, and off it goes. As we talked about earlier, we're going to set up those promotions with retailers. If we believe that the market is going to have some upside opportunity to it, then the wholesale part of the market can be really helpful. If we get a lot more fruit than expected, it usually has to be discounted unless we see that the market's going to turn around pretty quickly. If we get a lot less fruit and we had planned to have some to be able to sell in that open market, then we're leaving some dollars on the table. So it is a constant alignment of the supply and the demand side. And as good a job as we can all do, both on demand and supply, the better we're all going to perform.
Okay, how far in advance is fruit pre-sold?
Far in advance. We kind of touched on that earlier. You could be pre-sold, or you could be pre-selling some of your volume 6 months or more in advance, and then you could be pre-selling some of your volume a week or two in advance, just depending on what we believe is going to happen in the marketplace and the type of customer and what they need from us. But Travis and I were sitting here on a panel together, but we're competitors, and he's going to want to get out there and get with the best customers, and I'm going to want to get out there and get with the best customers. And so the further out we can get, the better we can do at locking that business up for ourselves. So, yeah.
Yep, and pre-selling can look different ways, I think, as well. So for us, the conversations that Tim's referencing 6 months in advance are really, they're more centered around volume, right? It's more of an expectation of, we think that this is what it's going to look like. At least for us, we're not committing to any kind of pricing. We're really not even committing to a volume that far in advance. It's more of a pre-planning meeting, if you will. And then as you get closer into the season, then there's more concrete discussions about, okay, we were talking about the fourth week of April going on ad. Do you think that that's still realistic? Well, the weather hasn't been quite right, or the crop's a little bit lighter than expected. You may want to wait another week or 10 days before you do that. I would say that the highest percentage of fruit, though, is sold anywhere from 7 to 21 days ahead of shipping. And that's when you're really dialing in prices, dialing in volumes. That's, for us, that's where we're really starting to commit to what's going on.
When did you know there was a surplus last year?
When do we know? So we knew ahead of the season that it was a big crop, and we knew ahead of the season that it was a big crop, and we knew ahead of the season that it was going to come off very quickly. And so I would say probably 6 weeks ahead, we were really spending a lot of time trying to figure out when that crop was going to hit, and our best guess about how much fruit there would be. And so, for us, we work with, a certain group of growers in Georgia, and we spend a lot of time on their farms looking at their crops. And, they have this many acres of this variety and this many acres of that variety. And here's where we think those varieties are going to peak. And so what does that mean for our sales? But we're just one guy, and we don't have access to everybody else's farms and growers. And not everybody's going to open the doors and say, yeah, here's all of my information. And so we have a view into a certain part of what's going on. And then we make our best guess about the rest of it based on what information we can pick up from talking to other folks, and then just paying attention to trends.
It's too far, it's over now. If you could back up a year, this is 2024, what would you do different?
So I feel like we came through last year, we being Wish Farms, and I can't speak for other marketers. We came through it okay. I think I would hope that our growers would say that we did a great job for them. I think that they would. What would we do differently? I personally made 3 trips to Georgia in those 6 weeks ahead of the season. And a guy, Joel, that works for me, he was with me on those 3 trips, and he made at least one more trip ahead of the season. I would say I probably would have made a couple of more trips really after the season had started getting going, just to keep abreast of, okay, this is, this field looked a certain way 2 weeks ago, and now we're seeing that it's 10% blue, and we weren't expecting it to be ripening as quickly as it was. And so maybe visiting the growers, for myself personally, getting into the field a couple of times, really once the season got going, I think would have been beneficial to us as an organization.
Well, I wasn't with Cal Giant at that time, so, but what I can say of what I've learned about it is really it was about better real-time communication and driving that point with retailers that the fruit was coming and it was going to be higher volume, and we've got to get the promotions lined up to pull it through. So there was a bit of from my understanding, there was a bit of disbelief that volume was going to get realized, because it hadn't before. So it happens sometimes. There are periods where you get these surges and everyone's thinking, well, it didn't do that last year, or it hasn't done it before, and then it suddenly does it, and then you find out there were unreported acres and all those kinds of things. So yeah, everyone learns from it and then retools.
There's also some marketers who deliberately obscure their information from like USDA reporting and that sort of thing, and it would be highly beneficial if everybody was on the same page about publishing that information, so that we really understand how much fruit is out there. Because no matter what we do, there's a certain amount of guessing involved, and that can change year to year depending on if a grower moves between a marketer that reports versus doesn't report, or other dynamics. And I think USHBC is doing a good job pushing ahead with their Berry Insights platform that will help with having a little bit more transparency as to what's going on a real-time basis, because it can be very opaque.
Give a little bit more on the Berry Insights program and what that gives those marketers who subscribe to that.
The Berry Insights program for marketers who are participating allows them to see in real time the number of pounds that are moving and what price they're being sold at. And so that really gives you clear and actionable data. The USDA is a voluntary reporting system, and you can really tell them anything you want to tell them, and they take that data into their considerations when they generate their market reports. The Berry Insights program, if a marketer who is participating in it wants to manipulate that program, it would be a pretty Herculean task to do that, because it ties directly into their computer systems.
You're saying you don't listen to the
It's there.
Nice.
It's an input.
It's there, and
Not for any of the berries.
You need more information to act, I say accurately, to try and to get the most accurate understanding of it. And there's certainly times where I look at it and say, that is not what's going on. But there's other times where it's very representative of what's going on. So it's a tool, and it's certainly not the gospel. It's something to be aware of, but it's certainly not the end all be all.
Regarding USDA trends over time, but it's the same for all the berries. It's, there's that one shipper who sold one pallet, and there's your high price. And then no one wants to admit the low price, so you don't really see the lows. And it's, for many people, it's a task that comes up during the day that they don't want to spend any time on, so they just say whatever they're going to say. So, yeah. But I think the USHBC one is going to be much more valuable. Wish we had something like that for all the berries.
Okay. Is there any talk of moving to a 1 pound clam to replace the pint clam?
No, there's no customer that I'm aware of that's asking for that. So if there was say a quality benefit for us to move toward it, then I think we could see some traction there. But right at this point, no.
On exports, are there any markets we should be trying to explore?
As an industry, in that time,
Well, right now, the dollar, you kept up with it, is very strong. I'm not sure that's going to come into play when we start doing Mexico. In China, our dollar is so powerful right now. In the last 4 weeks, it's taken off. Every currency, EU, Japan, Russia, China. So I don't know, if we want to do it, other countries, we can pay it.
We have heard from our neighbors to the north already about the shift and the weakening of the Canadian dollar against the U.S. dollar, and how that may impact their ability to pay for fruit moving forward, which would hurt, because Canada can be a significant market for U.S. fruit. So it is something to be aware of and pay attention to. As far as others, specific countries, most of them would require either a boat ride or a plane ride. And developing new markets is, they have to be able to pay at least the equivalent of our market plus the cost to get it there, plus a premium for the risk associated with getting there. And it's difficult to find that. You've got Europe, which is largely supplied by countries on their side of the ocean, and then so your next look is to Mexico or to Asia, and you've got what you just mentioned, sir, which is the strengthening of the dollar. You have very high freight costs and very significant risk exposure. And on top of that, there's not a lot of countries that have the money to pay for blueberries.
I would tag into that there's, and blueberries production is being advanced almost everywhere in the world. So, but here at home, new usage occasions, we do have washed and ready, but that code really hasn't been totally cracked yet. And there's a huge upside opportunity if we could do that, and we could break into that sort of single-use occasions. So there's kind of another frontier right here at home in just driving more usage occasions and ways for people to use blueberries and to make it even more convenient. Because it is really the most convenient of all the berries as it sits right now. They're pretty durable. So I personally want to see more focus on that and R&D and trying to really break into that. Look at what bag salads have done. It's amazing. And there's opportunities there for us to exploit over the coming years if we really focus in those areas. So.
Do retailers prefer domestic or import fruit?
I think we kind of addressed that one with, if, as Travis mentioned, if there is domestic fruit available and it outcompetes on all the factors, quality, flavor, it's closer, then they're going to opt for that. And those, sometimes those, so you get stuck into a pattern. I don't mean to use that word stuck like it's not movable, but there is a market that we've been following, fruit from this location this time of year, fruit from this location this time of year, and you're in the beginning of the season or the end of the season. And as producing areas in the U.S., like this area here, become more prominent, over time, as long as we're doing all the right things, it can move in and take over what was there before. And that's what we've seen in berries always. There was very little to no winter production, and then somebody somewhere had winter production and we were able to sell it. And then somebody else had it, and then somebody got better, and then we do indoor farming. There's all these things that are at play, and it's all about creating that nice, steady flow of product all year round. And there's no magic to where they would prefer to buy from if they can. So, yeah.
Prices, that's what I think. I know people say one thing and they do another, and I think price, if this cheaper from Mexico, we're going to buy it.
Yeah. So, in my experience, Mexican fruit is actually generally more expensive than domestic fruit. Yeah. And partly, part of that dynamic is that a lot of that goes to the West Coast. But what I have observed is that Mexican fruit is at the same or higher prices relative to domestic fruit. It's not, retailers don't, they never tell you, I'll pay you this price for this country or this price for fruit from that country. It's more likely that they will draw a line and they'll say, I want fruit from, and it's not even country, it may be state. Hey, we're in a time of year, we only want fruit from this place now for whatever reason. It could be political in the sense that it's there's a production, exactly, it's a grocery chain that's based in a major producing state. It could be their perception of some variety that they feel like is very popular with their customers. There's a lot of different reasons that they may prefer fruit from one region versus another, but at least in my experience, and you may have comments, is that there's Mexican fruit in particular is not any less expensive than domestically produced fruit.
Do you have any customers asking for our bigger or
Bigger jumbos?
specifically asking for that?
Oh yeah. There's I couldn't tell you the percentage of retailers that have a jumbo program at this point, but we do get questions about them frequently. We are supplying some of our retailers with jumbo berries. We're now able, really, with advancements in genetics and production areas, to supply a jumbo blueberry more or less year-round, which has contributed to the ability of the retailer to carry that berry. They're not putting an item on the shelf and then 2 weeks later they don't have it anymore, and so then they have to rearrange everything and take their price tags off the shelf and turn it on and off the system, and et cetera. But what's interesting about that, and this is a little bit of a sidebar to your comment, is that what's considered a jumbo blueberry today is probably not going to be a jumbo blueberry tomorrow. And so, the standard just a couple years ago was 18 millimeters. And now there's a couple left who accept 18 millimeter as jumbo. There's a few that have moved to 19 millimeter, and there's a number that have stepped it up to 20 millimeter. And that 20 millimeter in a couple years may be 22 millimeters, for instance. So I could get on a soapbox about jumbos.
Well said. Yeah, so yes, they're growing in demand. Retailers who have typically had, say, perhaps sort of a lower demographic shopping are in the process right now of convincing themselves that that type of shopper will buy jumbos, and they will. And that's what we're seeing. So demand's going to continue to go up. It'll have its space. You know, so you think about the whole berry patch and all the items, I think the jumbo's going to kind of work its way in there and take a prominent space year-round as possible. You can. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's going to keep growing, and some of the varieties lend themselves to doing jumbos all the time, and some don't. So we have to take that into account. How far out we want to talk to customers about whether we're going to have them or not. So, but it's there. Yeah. Pack sizes on them could change. I mean, we've kind of settled on our current pack size, but could grow.
They go back to your question about time or
Yeah.
We talked about the conventional market. Where do you think the domestic organic market, the future, what does it look like for it?
Yeah, we touched on it just a little bit, but you know, from my perspective, it's about filling in those periods where there's less organic supply, and there'll be big opportunities as we continue to do that.
I would add to that the organic market is very oversupplied certain times of the year and very undersupplied other times of the year. Overall, demand for organics is growing, I think, in what I've observed at a slower rate than the overall demand for blueberries. It's not, you know, I would say probably 10 years ago, the sentiment or the feeling was that it doesn't matter how many organics you produce, everybody's going to want them. And they'll eventually replace conventional, and it'll just be an organic marketplace, and that certainly hasn't played out.
It's growing at 8%. Everybody's looking at numbers. It's growing at 8%.
Yeah, which is a good growth rate, but it pales in comparison to overall demand growth for blueberries.
Who are marketers getting their estimates from? Are they getting them from the grower, from the packers?
We get our estimates from a combination of both growers and packers, and we go out and we work on our own estimates, lending or pulling from past experience as a blueberry grower. I like to basically trust but verify what the information coming to me is about how much fruit's out there.
Yeah, I would agree.
Let me ask you a question. I love it. This is my life. I've got thousands.
Ours too.
Tell us what you think, it's just your opinion, what the customer, the blueberry customer wants. I want you to open speak, because if you ain't saying anything wrong, we will love your answer, okay?
So this is another one I could get a soapbox on, but the best blueberry is the one where somebody's sitting at their desk working, and I put a pint of blueberries next to them, and they get up and they look over and they realize they've eaten that whole clamshell. And that doesn't mean that it's the biggest berry. It doesn't mean it's the crunchiest berry. It doesn't mean it's the sweetest berry. It's got to be the berry that is, in my opinion, I describe it as easy to eat. Okay, that means that it's got reasonable firmness. It's got reasonable sugars. It's generally speaking lower on acidity, And that's where what you just find yourself mindlessly reaching for more because it's easy to eat and it's got a good base flavor and it appeals to a broad audience because taste is highly personal, and some people prefer tart, some people prefer super sweet, and so it's almost like a utility player berry. You want to find something that just kind of runs in that middle sort of average, if you will. But most importantly, it's got to be sustainable to be farmed. If you can't grow it and make money at it, it doesn't matter what it tastes like, what it looks like, how big it is, because the farm's not going to be around to grow it.
I almost don't even want to touch that answer because that was so good.
Let me ask you, we want you, we always sell liver, we want you to love the brand. Okay? With as much information as we can give you today, what can we give you? I don't hear nutritional value there, and I'd like y'all to know that information as much as possible. Because I think the consumer today, particularly the younger generation, are very interested in getting more nutrients into their body. And blueberries are the superfood. And we just like to give y'all as much. I mean, I would like it every foot, every gun, every 5 hours we can give you guys, because you really basically run our lives, you know? We can eat supper tomorrow night because of what y'all have done, basically. We want y'all to have as much information here.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, like nutritional value, I mean, we have associations and that are doing the research and communicating. As we mentioned earlier, there's a massive health halo for blueberries. It's a superfood that's been known for a long, long, long time. That hasn't changed. Everybody wants to be a superfood, but blueberries are, and it's a proven fact. So for us, in order to be effective, as we've been talking about, it's about, it's that communication about what we believe the supply is going to be. It's the continued evolution and replacement of old varieties with better tasting, higher quality varieties. It's expensive, but we just talked about what it takes for people to want to eat more blueberries. If it tastes good, they'll buy it again, and that's what we really need. And we, of course, everybody's trying to drive costs down, and we should, right? Drive it out of packaging, drive it out of production, drive it out of the logistics and transportation part of it, everywhere we possibly can. But for us to create organized markets, organized meaning we've created the right amount of demand for the volume that's going to be out there, so we can optimize and do the best on pricing that we can possibly do. It's about communication. And so timely, accurate estimates, any other variables that are coming up that you're seeing. Something around quality, something around disease, whatever. What percent of the crop is it going to affect? It does us no good to just hear that it's going to rain. What helps us is to say, we're going to have a storm, and this is what the outcome is going to be, the likely outcome. That's another planning element that we can act on. And that's probably my biggest frustration with the information that we get is it's a response of this is going to happen, but then there's no follow up on, okay, what does that mean? So we're left to try to interpret it ourselves. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't get it right.
Let me ask you this. When people are organizing blueberry market, do they include y'all? Not what I look at, where I'm coming from, cranberries have done a beautiful job over the years advertising. Now beets are coming on strong with their advertising. This is the powerful beet, this is the, everything. I just don't see it in the blueberry industry, and I think that's a deficit. And I'm not for planting to you guys, but I just thought maybe if y'all were in a group and y'all could voice that opinion that we need help. And I really think that's a deficit because everybody else is starting to pick up. It's starting to, what our value is, how more economical it is to buy blueberries than their blood pressure. People start to figure that one out.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Is there talk of increasing the USHBC assessment? And that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
You favor that?
That's why advertising blueberry, I think that would be great. And I think that's where we want.
And that's where it needs to come from as well. You know, so we as individual markets, our budgets are so big. So we do it in social, we do it on our websites. You know, we're working with our customers to do messaging where possible around that area. But to that point, as we all know, you're right. It is its own medicine, right? It's a health food, but we could say that for all of fruits and vegetables, right? We need consumers to eat more fruits and vegetables, and it would alleviate a lot of the issues that we have from a health perspective, as well as create new markets and opportunities for all of us. And that's a pretty heavy lift, right? That involves a unified approach to how we speak about the foods that we eat. So we could open up that can of worms maybe at a different time. So you got anything, Gus? Okay.
So I think we're basically out of time. It's 3:07. We may have time for one more question if anybody has one in the audience.
Thank you for being here. Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
Appreciate it, John.
Yeah.
How much influence or how much respect does cartel have when it's coming out of Mexico?
That is certainly a current talking point that you hear people speak of with no real validation and proof. And so I think to kind of weigh into it would just be conjecture at this point. I think that if you know, so I don't know about travels, but I've traveled in Mexico quite extensively over my 25-year career in the berry business. And there is no question there are marginal type of growers in various commodities, and those are the horror stories that you hear. The same ones that we kind of hear about areas in the U.S. I can remember back in my early career, certain regions of the country that had no food safety practices at all, you know, and now we do. And then there's the reality that in no matter where you are, but I'll speak to Mexico because you were talking about the cartels, there are growers that are state-of-the-art in what they do, highly funded, highly educated, and they're running in really incredible farming operations. And so it's easy to get caught up in a story that leads kind of down a rabbit hole without understanding the context of everything. So like as a marketer, Cal Giant and Wish Farms, who do you think we want to work with if we're bringing in fruit, whether it's, no matter what berry it is, from a foreign country? Well, we're not going to work with the cartels or whatever that type of farmer is. We're trying to look for the best guys, right? People who are doing things the right way, people who are growing it the right way and investing the money. So that's what we're always trying to do. So, I don't know. I guess it depends on what news you hear and what you choose to believe, but so it's not representative of the industry.
I feel like that's the direction to go, and I'm not questioning that. I know that this is that. We just hear more stories from our levels that are coming in on us.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a different, it's a different topic there, and certainly there are some labor contractors that are not working above the board, and then there's some really good ones, you know. So if you ever need some, I can give you names. I'm sure Travis can too, about people who are bringing labor in and doing it the right way, and who you could trust. They may cost a little more to do it with, but you would feel very confident that their whole process, their whole business is above the board, and they can prove it to you too. So be careful.
Peso is 50 pesos per dollar. I'm just wondering if that's going to take care of the problem on food. But you may have a different story than another market. I really would like to hear what's happening going on.
FX. Yes, is there like specifically a question or just an opinion?
I was just saying, the trade, treatment is a natural thing.
Yeah,
You can't play with it, you guys have no control, I have no control.
yeah.
But that market, they take care of their foreign market like this.
Yeah, we have to consider that, you know, especially as we're budgeting volumes and what we're spending and how we're doing the business. And you believe you have it dialed in and then things change and, yeah. I have no exact answer for you there. We're trying to hedge against it. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
So I
Appreciate you
think
being here.
that's all the time we got.